Welcome everyone to the August edition of the DataHub community meeting. Let's get right to it. We have a packed agenda as usual. First off, I'll go through the project updates as usual, talk about what we've accomplished in August. We've been busy building and the upcoming release 0812. Then we have a demo of not role-based, but fine-grained access control by Joyce. And then we go to Indonesia, where Taufiq Ibrahim will talk to us about how DataHub is being used at Warung Pintar and the latest Redash connector that he has contributed. After that, we're going to do a deep dive into DataHub system performance and understand how you can measure DataHub system performance. Dexter has been busy building a lot of instrumentation into the DataHub system, and he'll walk through how you can monitor it effectively. And finally, there's one more thing that we would like to share with the community, so stay tuned for that. All right, so project updates. We've been, as you can tell, shipping code furiously. We've had like 3 or 4 releases this month. Overall, from a commit perspective, I was just looking at the commits since the last town hall. We've got more than 150 actually, and so we're continuing our 100+ commits per month rate, and we've got more than 20 committers, almost 24 committers from 13 different companies and 6 new contributors. So welcome to all of you. Looking forward to more contributions from each one of you, and we'll keep building interesting features together. In terms of the biggest highlights, we have Business Glossary phase 1 is now complete. So the models, metadata models are in, the API is complete, the UI is also complete from a read-only perspective. And I'll do a quick demo showing you how you can get Business Glossary into DataHub and view it. We're also releasing role-based access controls milestone 1. John will talk you through how it has been built and what capabilities you're going to have. And then similarly on the users and groups track, we've got a bunch of work done with integration with Okta and Azure AD, as well as just-in-time provisioning that we'll walk through. In other tracks, typically we go over like product improvements, integrations, and developer experience improvements. We've had work in all 3 tracks, and I'll cover them next. But first, some community callouts. These are the people who go above and beyond and really help us keep the community alive and vibrant. So first off, Asim Bansal, yet again, for keeping the bar high, both on Slack and on GitHub. He's been just amazing at asking questions, answering questions, as well as providing contributions wherever possible. Second call out, Frederick, for continuing to improve our ingestion code base, recently contributed the ability for you to extend and bring in your own SQL parser when analyzing LookML queries. I think it's going to be quite interesting to do that. Then we have Taufiq Ibrahim and Chris Colson, also known as Data Science Chris, for collaborating on the Redash contribution. And then we have Simon, Orimus, Waliur, and Seraph, who have been consistently asking great questions. You know, we love stack traces and we love troubleshooting issues, but we also like talking about things like how should data meshes be modeled and what does MLOps look like? And so it's been great having high quality conversations as well in our community. Talking about the community, Dan Westoby, Excel, David Schmidt, and Chris Colson have been helping the community out generously with their time when people have issues, helping them out with solutions. So thank you, all of you, for doing that. It takes a village to keep the community growing, and thanks a lot for continuing to do that. And last but not the least, Dmitry Buikin, for giving great feedback on our last town hall MLOps integration. We're going to continue building out better lineage integration between features and data sets, as well as other systems in the ecosystem. So stay tuned for that. Moving on, the first product improvement that we would like to share is Business Glossary Phase 1. And I'll do a quick demo, but before that, just a quick intro to Business Glossary itself. It's really a way of representing a tree of concepts that are useful for attaching to existing data sets or fields. So for example, at your company, you may decide to have a taxonomy that says classification as a top level node. And within that, terms like confidential or highly confidential or sensitive that live within the classification node. Similarly, you can have another node called clients and accounts, and all client and account stuff lives under there, like an account. And an account can also contain a balance, which itself might be a term under the clients and accounts node. Now, similarly, you can also have relationships across these taxonomies. For example, a balance or an account might be confidential or might have highly confidential data. And so you can have a relationship between accounts as well as highly confidential terms. So let me show you how you would describe something like this using the most favorite language of data engineers, YAML. And I'll get into a terminal. So this is a PR I opened earlier today. It shows you how you can create a business glossary using YAML and then ingest it as a standard source. So first, let's look at the recipe. If everyone is familiar with the recipe, this is what it looks like. You have a source and a sink. The sink looks exactly the same. Destination is DataHub REST. And the source in this case is of type DataHub Business Glossary. This is a new source that I've created. And a config file, which is the business glossary itself. So let's look at what that business glossary looks like. All right, firstly, we have a version identifier and then a source, which kind of describes who is even specifying this glossary. So in my case, I decided that DataHub is the author of the glossary. In your company's case, you might have your company's name here. And then default owners for all things in the glossary. These could be users, they could also be groups. You can have a URL, for example, this could point to the GitHub location of where this business glossary file is stored. And then below that, you have nodes, and then contained within nodes, you have terms. So let's look at the nodes I created. I created a node called classification, just like I showed you in the slide deck before. It's got a description and it has terms within it, like names. The terms have names like sensitive, confidential, highly confidential, with some descriptions attached to them. Similarly, I created another node called personal information, which contains terms like email, address, gender. And notice for the email term, I also have an inherits specification. And email seems to be inheriting from classification.confidential, which is a term I just described. Inherits is really like a relationship. And so what I'm basically saying is emails are classified as confidential. The owner in this case is a group. And as we go further down, you see gender is inheriting the sensitive classification. Further down, we have another node called clients and accounts. And that includes, I copied this actually from Fibo. And that's why when I define the term, I say that the term source is external, the source ref is Fibo. I even give a link for where this term is defined in the Fibo glossary. And then I have some specializations of the term, like it inherits highly confidential, and it contains another term, which is a client and account balance term, which I define next. The balance term is also another term contained in Fibo, comes from external. So this is what a YAML file looks like. And you could either have all of this glossary in a single file, or you could split it up across multiple files, as long as you preserve the overall structure. And you can imagine checking this into source control and just managing it just like you manage all your code. Now, when this is checked in and you want to ingest this into DataHub, all you need to do is just run DataHub ingest and point it to the recipe file that I just described. So let's ingest this recipe. But before that, let's go into DataHub itself and check whether we have a glossary ahead of time or not. All right, so we are in the DataHub UI, and this is the home page. Let's look at the business glossary. It's empty. Now let's go back to our terminal and run that ingestion. Hold a deep breath while ingestion runs. There you go. We ingested 11 terms. Now let's go into the business glossary and see if we see them. There you go. So we have our business glossary terms. The top level nodes are in here. We can go into them and see the terms within that. We see that ownership has been ingested as well. And we can go into each one of these things like, remember email. It's got a source. You can go view the source. It's also got related terms. And you can see that it inherits the classification confidential term. And so you can view it here as well. Similarly, we can go into accounts and go to the account term. And when we go to related terms, we see that it contains a balance, just like we had described, as well as inherits the highly confidential term. So that in a nutshell is how you can produce and load an entire business glossary into DataHub. So what good is a business glossary if you don't attach it to data sets and fields? So let's look at a particular data set that we might want to attach a business glossary to. Here is a user account, and it seems to have some tags like operational. It seems to have a field called an email, but we don't see any terms attached to them. And it would be nice to know that the user account is actually of type account, and the email in here is actually of type email. So let's ingest those terms. For that, I'll go back to the terminal. And in this case, I have a nicely prepared datasets.json file. If you're familiar with how MCEs look, you should be right at home here. This is one of the classic MCE JSON files. And what I have done here is just added at the top level, at the dataset level, a glossary term attachment, attaching this dataset to the clients and accounts.account term. And then further below in the field section, next to the email field, I have attached it to a glossary term called personal information.email. So now I have all of my terms attached to the appropriate place, one at the dataset level and one at the field level. And now let's try ingesting this. DataHub ingest -c datasets.yaml. All right, we ingested that record. And now if we refresh this page, woohoo, the demo works. We see tags and terms attached. An account has been attached to the account user account, and then the email term has been attached to the user. If I go into the email now, I'll see that there are related entities like data sets that are already attached to this thing, as well as if I go to the account term, I'll see that same data set is also attached to these terms. It also, you can also search for these things. So I can just type email and I'll get a helpful drop down where autocomplete shows me that I can search for personal information.email. And if I search for it, I not only get the glossary term, but I also get the data sets that have that term attached to it. So that in a nutshell is the business glossary demo. Now let's go back to the next phase of product improvements, which are key value schemas in Kafka and better handling of nested schemas. So Kafka, as you know, has value schemas, but in many cases, people also use complex key schemas when they produce topics to Kafka. And in those cases, DataHub wasn't able to represent it before. So not anymore. We now support both keys as well as values. And so if you use the new Kafka source and upgrade your Acryl DataHub libraries, you'll be able to see both keys as well as values showing up in a toggle bar at the very top right. In addition to that, we also went in and improved our representation of highly structured nested schemas. So now you can finally ingest DataHub's own Kafka topics and actually explore the metadata schema itself. We've done a lot of work in representing structs as well as unions well. So you should be able to actually browse the schema pretty nicely and understand what this very complicated schema looks like. All right, so that's pretty much what I had to share. And now we're going to go over to John, who's going to give us a quick update on what has been cooking on users and groups.
John here. I'm just going to give a quick update on users and groups management in DataHub. So let me just present my screen here. So we've had some recent developments on the ingesting users and groups front. So this is something we've actually gotten quite a few questions about recently. So we're putting some effort into making sure our guidance is clear around how to ingest your users as well as your groups into DataHub's platform. On the recent developments, we've added a couple new ingestion sources. So this is batch ingestion sources to pull users and groups out of your third-party identity stores and bring them into DataHub, both from Okta as well as Azure AD. We've also added just-in-time user and group provisioning, which I'll get into detail on what that means in just a minute, but at a high level, this means that when people log in, we will provision them users and their corresponding groups if they do not already exist in DataHub system at login time. We've also made groups searchable via the UI, and we've added group members on the groups page itself, so you can easily understand who is in a particular group. So now I'm going to get into the details of just-in-time provisioning. This is a feature that's enabled via OIDC currently, but in a nutshell, when a user logs in over OIDC, we will check to see whether the user exists in the system already using a unique username that we extract from the OIDC profile that we get back from the identity provider. If that user doesn't exist, we'll go ahead and create them in DataHub system. And if we are able to extract a groups claim, which denotes which groups they're in, we'll also go ahead and create group objects for the groups that they're associated with, if they don't exist in DataHub already. In the coming release, this will be enabled by default, although there are flags, of course, to control the behavior and turn this off completely. And those are under auth OIDC just-in-time configs on DataHub front-end's container.
So I just want to quickly give an overview at a high level of like user and group management in DataHub. There's kind of two paths to seeding users and groups into DataHub. The first is what we call proactive, which is basically you're batch ingesting users and groups from some third-party system, some external system like Okta or AD. And we actually now provide the ability to validate that that user has already been sort of ingested at login time. So basically, you can go into Okta and maybe only ingest 20 users that you want to use as your beta users. And when they log in, they will either be allowed or denied based on if they're already in the system. So that's kind of the proactive approach. And then the reactive approach is what I just talked about. It's just-in-time ingestion at login time over OIDC. And actually, both of these today do require OpenID Connect for that authentication piece. If you'll hit next, Shirshanka. So if this doesn't work for your organization, i.e. you're using SAML or LDAP would work better, something else, please do let us know. We're always trying to get feedback about this particular thing because it's a domain that's kind of different between a lot of organizations. And we do it one way, we use OIDC, but everyone does it a slightly different way. So we definitely want feedback to understand if there's a better way to kind of pull in your organization's users and groups into DataHub and seed them. Okay, next slide. So what's on the horizon? Well, we'd actually like to add sort of an admin console in the UI that allows you to manage users and groups. So do things like creating new groups through the UI, removing groups that you may have ingested or may have been provisioned, and then manage group membership. So actually be able to add users to groups, remove users from groups. And then finally, we'd like kind of fine-grained user state management, the ability to kind of activate and deactivate users that you may have ingested from a third-party source or who may have been provisioned at login time. So that's what we're working on now. We also have a user and group onboarding guide coming. So once that user and groups management UI lands, that'll kind of finish this track for now. And we'll kind of sum that up with this user and group onboarding guide, which will hopefully be very clear about how we can get users and groups into DataHub. And then finally, we want to build out a couple more batch connectors. There's been requests for things like Keycloak and things like Google Identity, some of these other third-party kind of users and group stores. So let us know if you have other connectors you'd like to see. We're definitely interested in taking requests there. So that's pretty much it. I think we can move on.
Awesome. So as usual, we have a lot of integration improvements pretty much across the board. A few callouts would be Redash. We'll talk about that later. Kafka Connect, we've added support for JDBC sources as well, not just the Debezium one that was there before. And for MongoDB, we added some small tweaks to handle really large schemas that were coming out of the schema inference system. So now, DataHub is not going to crash on you if you have 13,000 fields in your schema, like some people do. All right. Moving on the developer track, we are going to talk about performance metrics. I'm not going to discuss that too much here. We've added a lot of improved documentation for ingestion sources. So if you go check out our ingestion docs, our source docs are much improved. Thanks to John and Kevin for doing that. And so as new sources come on board, we have a pretty nice way of adding them to the documentation now. All right, so with that, back to John to start off with the first session of the day, which is fine-grained access control.
All right, thank you, Shirshanka. Let me just take over the screen here. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. Yeah, so I'm going to do a quick overview of where we are in fine-grained access control. This is something we started thinking about at the beginning of the summer based on a lot of feedback from the community around wanting this capability to control who has access to what metadata on DataHub's platform. So I'm going to start by just talking about what access control is. So how we think about it is that access control is a way to declare who can perform what action against which resources. And how we model this is with three kind of sub-concepts. One is an actor, which determines the who portion of the policy, a privilege, so what action they can perform, and then finally a resource or an object. This is commonly kind of known as actor verb object in some areas of the world. We use actor privilege resource. And what we do is we put these three things together and we call them a policy. So with the new kind of implementation, we allow you to declare a policy that includes these three things to control access on DataHub. So I'm just going to talk about a few policies in English. On DataHub's platform, you may want to kind of restrict who can do certain things. So number one, maybe dataset owners should be able to add documentation, but they shouldn't be able to add tags. So we want a controlled vocabulary of tags, perhaps. Another example is maybe the data platform team should be able to edit anything about a data set, right? Because they manage the platform, they're sort of the admins of DataHub. Maybe Ted, our data steward, should be able to edit any data set's tags. Maybe that's his job, but shouldn't be able to edit the description or the ownership or anything else. And finally, maybe the administrative group should be able to manage policies themselves, right? So should be able to dictate who can do what on the platform. So as part of milestone 1 for fine-grained access control, we defined the following as the scope. We wanted to be able to define and enforce policies supporting the following characteristics. We wanted to be able to support the following privileges: editing tags, editing ownership, editing documentation for an asset, editing the links to the institutional memory about an asset, and finally, in the case of data sets, editing schema tags and descriptions. We wanted to apply these policies to resources at 2 levels. So one is based on the resource type. So imagine, data set assets or dashboards or charts, as well as the resource identity level. So to be able to call out a particular data set or a particular chart and apply fine-grained access control against that asset individually. And then finally, we wanted to model this concept of actors using our concept of user in groups that already exists. So we wanted to be able to say that John should be able to do something to a particular data set, or maybe a group should be able to do something to a particular dashboard. We also wanted the ability to support sort of this wildcard predicate and say all users or all groups should be able to do something to a particular asset. Finally, we wanted to model one sort of edge-based predicate, which allows owners of assets to perform particular actions. So perhaps the owners of a data set should be able to, again, update the description, maybe not the tags. So now I'm going to go into a demo of the milestone 1 implementation of policies based on what we just talked about. So I'm going to go over here to DataHub, and right off the bat, I'm just going to, this is the default deployment of the new policies world. So I'm going to go ahead and search. I've just got some of this, basic sample metadata in here that you guys are all familiar with, probably. I'm going to go to this first data set, and I'm going to try to add a tag, right? So let's say new tag. Okay, I already have one, my new tag. And what you'll notice right away is that we've got a warning here, which says, looks like you're unauthorized to perform that action. So why would that be? Well, that's because we haven't defined any policies yet. So I, by default, am not able to do anything to this data set, right? This is kind of a fail close world. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this new panel on the left side here, and we're going to see a few different admin level controls. We're going to go to this policies tab, which is where we can construct policies. And you'll see that currently we have no policies, so that probably explains why I can't do anything. So I'm going to click this new policy button to add a new policy. And what you're going to see here is a workflow that really roughly models that policy structure that I had talked about previously, actor, object, privilege. So I'm going to start by giving my policy a name, and I'm going to actually use the example from the slides. I'm going to say data sets, owners, documentation policy, right? So basically I want to say that owners can update documentation, but that's it about a particular data set. So next I'm going to choose the type of the policy. There are two types today. One is a platform policy, which is really about who can do things at the administrative level on the platform, like who can edit policies or who can view the analytics, for example. The second type is a metadata policy, and that dictates who can do what to a particular data asset or metadata asset on the platform. So I'm going to go ahead and choose metadata because I'm trying to edit the policy for data sets. Finally, I'm going to give it a description, say only owners should be allowed, or sorry, let's actually say owners should be allowed to edit docs. That's it. Then I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to choose the asset type that I want to apply the policy to. So in this case, it's going to be data sets. I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to choose the asset that I want this policy to apply to. So I can either search for a particular asset, right? Or I can just say all data sets, right? Because this should apply to all data sets. And then finally, I can select a set of privileges. So I'm going to go ahead and say, edit documentation. And that's the only privilege I want to allow. Finally, we get to the third final screen where we can say who can actually do this. And you'll see right away, there's three kind of options here. We can either call out users specifically. So I can say DataHub user or John Doe or whatever. We can call out groups, or we can say owners, right? So this is that edge-based predicate. Finally, I'm just going to save this. And now you see I have a new policy, right? You can see it's in an active state, which means it should apply. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the data sets. As you'll notice, this actually isn't owned by me. I'm logged in as DataHub. So I'm going to go to the second data set, which is owned by me. And I'm going to attempt to update the documentation, my new documentation. And you'll see I was able to update it. Great, awesome. So let's actually back out here. And let's try to update a data set's documentation that I don't own, right? So I don't own this one. I'm going to come in here and say, hey, I want to update. Oops, looks like I'm unauthorized to perform that. And that's because the policy doesn't allow me to do that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to open up this policy again. I'm going to take a look at what it says. And I'm actually just going to deactivate it because, actually I want to revoke this policy. So I'm going to go ahead and click deactivate. And you'll see that this policy is now in an inactive state. So if I go back to that Hive data set, which I updated previously, see if I can do it now. I just want to clear what I added. You'll see that I'm unauthorized to perform that. It's because the policy has been deactivated. So that's the first kind of policy, the ownership-based policy. The second one I'll add is sort of a point policy. And that's where a particular user should be able to do something on the platform. So I'm going to go ahead and say that DataHub, this user that I'm logged in as, add tags to specific data set, right? So this is that point lookup use case. So I'm going to go ahead and just skip adding a description. I'm going to again choose data sets. And in this case, I'm going to actually look up a particular data set. So I want to say that I should be able to update the HDFS data set, or maybe the Kafka one as well. So I'll select two of them. And then finally, I'll select a privilege, in this case, editing tags. And then I will just find myself, DataHub, and I'll save it. And you can see we've got the new policy. It's in the active state. So now I should be able to update the tags for this HDFS one, which I wasn't able to update in the initial case. So let's say my new tag again. See if I can add it. Looks like I was able to add it. I can remove tags, of course, because I have full control over editing the tags. Right, so this one works. This one's deactivated. And then actually, sorry, this one's deactivated. And then I'm also the owner of this one. So I can probably add a tag here as well. Awesome. Okay, so we've correctly created two policies. And now finally, there's the final thing I want to demo, which is just cleaning up policies. So there are cases in which you may have created a policy by mistake. What you can do there is you can actually just come in, delete the policy, right? Delete the policy, and we're back to state 0. So this is, in a nutshell, what policy management and role fine-grained access control will look like on DataHub. This is the MVP. All of those privileges, the assets you saw, both metadata privileges as well as the platform privileges will be supported. Basic platform privileges, including managing policies, managing analytics, things like that. Eventually, that'll be extended to include things like managing users and groups. So adding groups, deleting groups, things like that. So pretty happy about how this turned out. Looking for feedback from the community. We will have, a global on-off switch here, which I'll talk about shortly when I get back into the demo or the slides here. But let's go ahead and continue here.
John, there is one question about who can even edit policies, like who has admin privileges on even the ability to add or create policies?
Yeah, so we model the ability to manage policies as a platform privilege, right? And so by default, DataHub will ship or launch with a set of sort of immutable policies. And those immutable policies will grant the ability to manage policies, to manage analytics to that core super user, which is DataHub today. So when you launch a fresh instance of DataHub, that DataHub user will have all privileges on the platform. And that'll be sort of the jump off point from which you can create additional policies. So you can add, your data platform team to be able to manage policies themselves and do everything. So that's kind of that model. We have sort of this seed root node, which can then kind of replicate itself, I guess.
Cool.
So I'm just going to quickly talk about the implementation, like what's going on here. Recently we moved our GraphQL API to the metadata service. So that's actually where a lot of this is kind of occurring. So what happens when a request comes in is, it goes through DataHub frontend, which is now just sort of our UI server, a web server that serves resources as well as proxies to the API. That'll go ahead and proxy back to the metadata service, which is commonly known as GMS. And at that GraphQL layer, we have what's called an authorizer. And that authorizer's job is to basically determine whether a particular action should be allowed or not. And it does this by periodically syncing with the database, which has the set of all the policies. There's kind of two cases in which it syncs. So one is on a cadence. So you can configure it to be syncing every 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you'd like. By default, it's at 2 minutes, as well as when the cache becomes stale. So if you add a policy or edit a policy state, as you saw in this demo, we will actually go and refetch the cache and reboot the cache. And so that gets us into the authorizer itself, this key component, which basically maintains that cache, always keeps kind of the latest view of the policies, as well as makes a determination at request time, whether to allow or deny a particular action. And it does so by exposing an API that takes those three pieces of the policy that we had talked about prior. So at request time, the invoking code will pass an actor, which is basically the user principal behind the request. It'll pass the groups that user is associated with, as well as a privilege it wants to authorize and the resource against which it wants to apply that privilege. The authorizer will then take that information, take the policies it knows about, and produce a decision by sort of executing predicates. So it's pretty awesome. So policies in practice, we want policies to be enabled or disabled globally at deploy time. So what this means is you can continue to use DataHub as you're using it today, where there's no policies and anyone on the platform can do anything. We wouldn't recommend that. We would recommend you actually do start using the policies because I think they'll be very, very helpful to make sure that metadata stays clean. But by default, again, DataHub will be that super user, which will be seeded with irrevocable kind of immutable policies that say that it can do anything. And so it'll be on the operator to go and spawn off additional policies on a per policy basis from that core admin account. Finally, I'll just talk about a little bit about what's on the horizon for policies. So after we get this kind of first code pass done, we want to release a policies v1 usage guide that'll talk about how you create policies, how you manage them. Hopefully it's self-explanatory, but I think it'll still be pretty helpful to have something accompanying a feature this big. We'll also look at supporting additional predicate types, especially on the resource itself. So we've gotten requests to have things like domain-based matching. So once we model domains in the resource type, being able to match on that, as well as sort of data platform or data source-based matching. So to be able to create a policy where maybe all data sets within a particular MySQL instance should be managed by someone. And then in the long term, we want to kind of consider the utility of a role-based actor predicate. So as you saw, there's mainly users and groups which are able to do different things. We have had some requests from a few folks that this layer of indirection, which is commonly called a role, would be perhaps useful. So we're actually looking for feedback from the community and direction from the community to understand whether that's a requirement that really is something we need to take into account here with the system. So that's pretty much it. Thanks, guys. I will hand it back to Shirshanka.
Thank you. We are running a little bit late, but I'll stay with the policy of allowing everyone to speak. There are a lot of good questions on the chat, and we will take it on general because I don't think we can get to all of them. Really good questions. Thanks for handling most of them, but I think there are a few others that are still open. All right, so let's move on to our community speaker, Taufiq, who is coming to us from Indonesia. Thanks, Taufiq, for staying up so late and giving us your time. Take it over. I will share the screen. So, and then as we get into the demo, we can go 1 second. All right.
Okay, thank you, Shirshanka. Good morning, everyone. I'm Taufiq. I'm from Indonesia. Right now, I'm working at Bizzy, now part of Warung Pintar Group, and I'm going to share our case study with DataHub and how we develop the Redash source connector here. Next. Yeah, this is some few things about Bizzy and which is now part of Warung Pintar Group. Bizzy was founded in 2015, and it was a B2B marketplace. And then we have several multiple company restructures. There's a mergers, there's sales, and then acquired by Warung Pintar into early to 2021. Now we are serving around 600 brands, FMCG brands, and serving around 230K of retailers across Indonesia. So actually, we have two kinds of business here. One is the supply side, which is working with the distributor and the FMCG brand. And the other thing is we work with the retail part, which is we call it Warung. Warung is actually in Indonesian word for grocery retailers. Yeah, next. Yeah, this is a data ecosystem at Warung Pintar Group and Bizzy. So we have several legacy, let's say legacy stack coming from existing platform from corporate enterprises like SAP, but we also have more modern architecture like cloud-based application. So we have like a mix of technology stacks. Like you can see that we have Airflow, we have still have SSIS here, and then we broke some of this stack into operational part and then the analytical part. And also we have operational domain, which is actually the ERP and the application databases. We do some batch processing in operational data engineering and stream processing, which is actually quite different from most analytical data engineering. We also touch the production database, like updating data, synchronized data from multiple sources. And we also captured, change the capture from the application database using Kafka Connect and sync it into multiple things like operational reporting DBs, and then also write into the BigQuery, which is processed by Airflow to be served by several BI and reporting tools. You can see that we have multiple reporting services. Like we have the old stack like legacy SQL Server reporting services. We have Metabase, we have Redash, and also we have Jupyter. Why we have so much stack here? Because we've been through multiple merge and sales, and we need to maintain most of it because the users still need to use it. That's why metadata and then the lineage things is pretty important here, so we can understand easier for all the data. Yeah, next. So why we need the data catalog in Bizzy? Because one, the first one is we have like endless repeated question from anyone, like where the data is, how it is produced, who owns it, and the question is like repeated every day from different person, and we keep answering it. And then it's also difficult to look for lineage and impact analysis, like because we have lots of data source and a lot of reporting that use the data. It's quite difficult to search if we want to change a data or modify a data. What is the impact for the other, for the application, for the reporting, something like that. Yeah, next. So this is our journey with data catalog things. At the beginning of 2020, we just create like a simple manual data lineage on Google Sheets, and then we moved to do some POC with Apache Atlas, but we found that it was too complex and too Hadoop at the time, so we stopped the POC. And then we also doing some POC with Amundsen, but at the time it wasn't really answering what we need. And then actually at the end of 2020, we found DataHub, and then we start doing POC and then development with DataHub. Next. So this is some reason why we choose DataHub. Mostly because DataHub pretty much match with our data set, like mostly like Kafka Connect and BigQuery and Kafka, because DataHub use Kafka a lot, right? So like it's really matched with our requirement. And then the no-code ingestion, the YAML recipes, that's really helpful for us. And then the development of the source connector and sync connector, it's really helpful. The documentation was really helpful. And then the other features that we are really love is we can show the dashboard link from the app, and then click to it, and then we will brought right into the dashboard itself. And then now we have the role-based access, and we can limit what user can do. That's just really awesome right now. Yeah, next. So this is our DataHub integrations usage here at our Pintar group. We have databases, mostly RDBMSs like MySQL, SQL Server, Postgres. We also have BigQuery, Kafka, and there are two source integration that we contributed. That is Kafka Connect and Redash. What we love from DataHub is it's actually highly customizable. The basic is actually, as long as you can construct the URL strings, then you'll be fine. And then previously we have several legacy lineage stored in the Google Sheet, and we just parse it into MCAs, and we have that lineage right into the DataHub. Even if the source is actually not working as plugin, we just push it directly to DataHub MCAs. Yeah, next. So why we develop Redash integration? Because after the merge, we found that Warung Pintar group use Redash a lot, from data analyst to product teams to HR teams. They use Redash a lot. They practically love to learn SQL, and they can use Redash quite good. And it's actually developed based on the superset source. And then the other reason is actually it helped the POC to be approved internally. And right now, actually, we already deployed in a simple EC2 server. And then we are going to release it next week to get the feedback from the other teams. Yeah.
Cool. So Taufiq, I think you wanted to do maybe a quick tour of your Redash integration that you have on your end.
Okay.
I will stop the share here so you can take over.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I hope that you can see my screen right now. Yeah, this is the example of the recipes of our Redash. Is you can find it in the documentation, the GitHub. Basically, what you need is the URL connection of the Redash server itself. This is the hosted, no, not the hosted Redash, but this is the open source one. And we need the API key, and then we can limit the page for testing purpose. By default, this is not limited, so it will ingest all the dashboard and chart. And we have the skip draft. Optionally, if this is the default true, so if you want to ingest the draft or unpublished dashboard and chart, you can set it to false. This is the example of ingesting to console. It's pretty much like the other DataHub ingestion. If you have lots of dashboard and chart, it will take quite some time. So this is the report that we already ingest 39 chart and dashboard. So I will skip my screen. Sorry. This is our DataHub. For example, I will search a dashboard called personal tracker. Yeah, this is a Redash dashboard. We can see what is inside. But unfortunately, for current development, we haven't engaged the ownership for now. Then we have the view in Redash button here. We can see what is it actually. This is the Redash dashboard that's actually querying the usage of the Redash itself. So if you see here, we can see that it composed of several charts, and we also can see the lineage here. The dashboard is composed by this one chart, and if we want to see the data source, we can see that it's actually connected to the Redash Postgres backend database itself. But currently, we haven't do things like how to map to the actual table, because it's going to need SQL parsing like LookML does, but we haven't developed it right now. Yeah, I think that's the demo of the Redash.
Cool. I think someday you can probably demo us the massive lineage graph that you showed me once. Which I think
if you want to, yeah, I can do that right now. I already prepared that for you. So one of the few things that we hope DataHub can address that is the lineage visualization. I think for now, most of the data catalog tools actually have the same problem. If we see here, this is actually the lineage that came from our legacy lineage Google Sheets, which I just push it into DataHub. And if we see that this is having quite a large lineage graph, and when you have this large lineage graph, it become quite difficult to read actually. Yeah, this is one of the things that hopefully can be found the solution by DataHub teams.
Yeah, I think we will ship people Oculus glasses so they can fly through these kind of lineage graphs soon.
Yeah, for example,
that
like
would be the next month's demo, yeah. Right, John? All right, but yeah, point completely taken. I think yes, lineage graphs they look beautiful until they become incomprehensible, and I think that's something we as an entire industry have to actually tackle.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on to the rest of the slides, and I will share them here. Okay. I think we already talked about this.
Yeah. This is DataHub developer experience coming from me and our team. Actually, the contribution for Kafka Connect source was my first open source contribution ever, actually, for GitHub things. Yeah, and I felt that the community is very welcoming. They are very supportive. I even got some private message, and like Shirshanka asked me, do I still want to contribute something like that? It's very supportive. Yeah, and the documentation is very helpful, like how to add new ingestion source. It's really helpful in the standard way. Yeah, this is our to-dos and future works. For internal, we currently being in POC state, we are still in POC state, but we will socialize and get users feedback starting from next week. And I hope that this will give impacts for our organization. And expectation for DataHub, yeah, we already talked about the lineage for the large graphs. And then we also interested in operational data quality metrics, something like lagging metrics, and then row count, something like that. Yeah, just to check for the anomaly on daily basis, something like that. Yeah, that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Taufiq. What time is it right now?
It's around almost midnight, actually.
All right. All right. Thank
No
you
problem.
so much.
I'm quite nocturnal, actually.
Cool. 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 Did the data for today arrive yet?
Yeah, it's after 1 a.m. actually.
Cool. 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 Best of luck for
Most of it.
today's data then. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks a
Thank you
lot,
so much.
Taufiq. And we will move ahead. And I'm thinking, in the interest of time, since we only have 5 more minutes, we're going to skip the performance metrics demo that Dexter had and go straight to the surprise session. What we will do is just set up a one-off developer session for people who are really interested in doing a deep dive into DataHub performance measurement. And we can kind of do an office hour session with Dexter on that, and he can show us how he's doing load testing and measuring performance, or we can do it as a follow-on session at a future town hall. So moving ahead to the surprise of today, I guess that's back to John.
Yeah, do you want me to just share screen again? I can
Sure.
go ahead and share. All right, guys, one more time you'll have to see me today. So I'm gonna reveal a little surprise we've been working on, and that is Extreme Makeover DataHub Edition. So if you guys have been tuned into DataHub for a long time, since the beginning of the year, actually, you'll know that our first pass on the React UI was really to get it to parity with that legacy Ember app. And what we've begun to do in the last month is actually start to improve the UI design and kind of get it into that envisioned state we had initially when we began the migration to React. So what we started with is redesigning some of the dataset page in particular. So that's what I'm going to demo. So I'm going to come over here to DataHub, and I'm just going to go through the login experience here. And immediately, you'll notice a fresh new appearance on the home page. Now, this redesign is actually not complete, so I ask that you kind of suspend your belief here. But we're going to go ahead and search for some data sets. And I'm going to go ahead into this first one. And you'll notice the new design here. A couple things to call out is we've kind of greatly improved the schema visualization. So we have this nested schema kind of expansion that we have now. We have colored tags, which is exciting. We have these fun owner bubbles. We have the side panel on the right side, which gives the kind of entity at a glance view. So we have the documentation, we have the statistics about the data set, we have the tags, we have the owners. Obviously, we have these little toolbars where you can switch between different things. This is an example of the documentation tab. One change we've made is that editing documentation is now an inline process. All right, so my update, just hit save. Okay, we saved that. Properties, nothing here. Some lineage, you can go ahead and see a redesigned sort of visualization experience. It's a little bit softer on the eyes, nicer around the edges. Queries got a little bit of a redesign here where we're actually highlighting the SQL syntax a bit better than before. If you'll recall, we just had some gray text previously. So I think this will be super useful. And then we have, the classic stats, both the latest view, the historical view, not too much has changed here. So Yeah, so basically this is to announce that we're going to be kind of going through the app piece by piece and redesigning it with this fresher new look, which we're really excited about. And what I'll talk about next is sort of what that journey will hopefully look like. Okay, let me just present. So yeah, just this final slide. The next thing we're going to be doing is kind of expanding beyond that data set page to the other entities, charts, dashboards, tasks, and pipelines. And then we're going to move on from there to redesign and rethink the search and browse experience. This is a sneak preview on the left here, where we actually have this more rich, faceted search experience, which I think hopefully will be a big improvement from what we have today. Finally, we'll be enriching that homepage, which will be that next thing with richer recommendations, as well as richer jump-off points to both search and sort of the more classic hierarchical discovery experience. And finally, we have dark mode coming as well. So we'll kind of be transposing this slick new look into the dark mode world as well. So super excited. Would love any feedback from the community. We'll be pushing out the first milestone here in the next week. Of the datasets page. All the pages are going to have generally this branding, but some of the, dashboard, chart, other pages will still sort of mainly look like they did previously for the time being until we get them all migrated. So that's pretty much it. Really excited about this one. Looking forward to feedback and contribution from the community as we progress with this.
Awesome, and that kind of concludes our session for today. Really sorry we couldn't get to you, Dexter. We'll catch you up in either a deep dive session with the developers, or we'll do it as a follow-on. But thanks everyone for all of the love and all of the star eyes. I was similarly excited when I first saw the demo. So yes, it actually makes such a big difference when there's an amazing platform beneath, but you can finally see the light at the very top as well. So really excited to see what we can do with the product going forward. Thanks to everyone for all the contributions and for staying up, and let's keep the momentum going. There were a lot of questions, even offline. We'll take them on Slack. And it's been cool. So see you in another 4 to 5 weeks, September 4th, Friday. Bye.
See you guys. And before I hop off, one last thing. I want to give a huge shout out to my colleague, Gabe, who drove the first part of this redesign. So thanks to Gabe. If you're looking for someone to thank, don't thank me, or thank Gabe for the redesign.